Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for Tuesday, February 26, 2019. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the latest film and TV news, and I will sit down and chat with the filmmakers behind Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta. And joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film Senior Writer Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's going on?
And writer Hoai-Tran Bui.
Hey, everyone.
Happy birthday, HT.
Yay! Happy birthday, HC!
Thanks, guys.
And you were celebrating your birthday by working.
Yes, working and then playing some Kingdom Hearts later tonight.
Yeah,
nice.
It's gonna be a hard party.
Yeah, so you're not full adulting it. You're half adulting it today.
I'm half adulting by playing a video game.
Yeah. Okay, let's jump into the news. Let's talk about some news that hit yesterday when we were recording our water cooler episode, and that is that Gremlins is getting an animated TV series. Ben, what do we know?
Yeah, this is going to be on the WarnerMedia streaming service, and we haven't really heard much about the original content that they're going to be producing for that service whenever it becomes available to the public. But a Gremlins animated series is currently in the works for this streaming service. It's going to be a prequel that follows Mr. Wing, who is the Chinese grandfather played in the movies by Key Luke, and the story follows him as a young man as he goes off on adventures with the friendly Mogwai Gizmo from the films. So that's essentially all we know. We know that Zhe Shun is going to be running this thing, writing, executive producing the series. But other than that, it's just a Gremlins animated series prequel. That's the baseline for what's going on here. Peter, I know you're probably maybe the biggest Gremlins fan on this episode of the podcast. What do you think about this?
Yes, I am a huge Gremlins fan. I own a life-sized Gizmo and a life-size Spike in my living room. This is weird. Like, I feel like the 80s was filled with these movies that were adult movies, but later on, like, kids kind of liked the characters in them, like, Gremlins and Short Circuit and those kind of films. They're not geared towards kids, but now I guess it's being fully co-opted for a family animated television series. I don't know how I feel about this. I don't feel like that character was like this world traveler going off on adventures with his Mogwai. Like, I don't know. HT, are you a fan at all of the Gremlin series?
Don't hate me, but I've never seen them.
What?
Oh, wow.
I know. Well, okay. I've never gotten the chance to see them, but I felt like just based on my knowledge of it, my working knowledge of the Gremlins series, I felt like it was kind of almost like subversion of those 80s toys that were always merchandise and stuff, and turn those into the horror, the monsters of this horror film. And I think that's kind of, it's funny. I
think you're thinking of more of like Child's Play than,
I guess. Yeah, I don't know. This is my just very basic knowledge of Gremlins, but yeah, I don't really know anything about it, so that's just like my impression, is that it's kind of like it was made to be anti-merchandise, and now it's becoming sort of merchandised.
HT, you need to see at least the first film. I know it came out probably 10 years, 15 years before you were born.
Yes, I've seen movies before I was born.
Yeah. No, I know. Ben, what are your thoughts on this?
I have actually only seen the first Gremlins, so I'm not sure, how this might potentially tie into the second movie or what the mythology is of this character throughout the whole franchise. But in terms of just relating it to the first movie, I mean, it's the same thing that we always come back to with prequels. It's like you're removing any sense of mystery and magic that may have been there by trying to fill in the gaps that it seems a little unnecessary in terms of that, taking that approach from it. I don't know. They've been talking for years about doing like a potential Gremlins 3 or maybe even just like a straight up reboot. And obviously nothing has happened with that yet. But I'm wondering if that might have been a better approach here, just instead of trying to answer questions that didn't need answering, maybe just continue the story on or something. But even still, like putting it in an animated form, I think part of the appeal of Gremlins is like it looks like there are these friendly alien creatures, but then they get gross and disgusting, and like, there's a twisted edge to those movies, and I'm not sure if you're going to be able to really capture that in animation.
Yeah, I'm actually wondering, well, first of all, I'm wondering, number one, who's the audience for this? Because anybody who has seen Gremlins, I mean, evidenced by HT today, most of the people who have seen Gremlins, I think, are probably in their 30s at this point. But I guess on the second hand, those people have kids, and now, like Star Wars and all these other things that are coming out, like, are subjecting their kids to all these things that they loved as a kid in their new form, right? So, like, maybe it's that. Maybe it's also, Ben, maybe maybe this is a backdoor way to get to that Gremlins 3 / reboot, is to, have this animated series that will get, Gizmo back into, pop culture for, like, a new, younger generation, so that they can eventually make this live action, third Gremlins film / reboot.
Yeah, make it a viable property in people's minds again. I mean, I guess that makes sense. And if this is going to be for the Warner streaming service, then maybe it signals that they're interested in doing more with these characters in live action down the road. I think that's a possibility for sure.
I just don't know how do you compare this against, like, the original offerings of Netflix or even Disney Plus, who is coming out with, TV shows featuring characters from the Marvel Cinematic Universe reprising their roles in limited series, and, the first live action Star Wars television show. Like, is a Gremlins animated show going to really capture people's money?
I don't think this is going to be
you've watched Cobra Kai about 40 times, so maybe.
Not 40 times, 3 times.
Okay.
But I'm eventually going to get someone else from this site to watch this and verify that I'm not insane, that this show is actually good. But that'll be another day. Okay, let's move on to Rotten Tomatoes. We've been talking a lot recently about how the user reviews on Rotten Tomatoes kind of get co-opted by these groups that are kind of trying to take these films down, films like Star Wars: The Last Jedi, Captain Marvel, and it seems like Rotten Tomatoes is finally going to strike back. HT, what do we know?
Yeah, it's about time. We've talked a lot about how toxic fandom has become this thing where there are just mass coordinated attacks against films that haven't even come out yet, like Captain Marvel, in which they're trying to bring down the audience score to sort of skewer public perception of these movies. And Rotten Tomatoes, after many months of apparent deliberation, is finally rolling out changes to the audience rating system. The first change will be that fans will no longer be able to leave or comments or reviews prior to movie's release, and the want to see score will now be shown as a number tallied in real time versus as a percentage as it was before, so as to prevent any confusion with the actual audience rating / score.
But is this going to stop people from mass going to that website and, like, giving a film that they haven't seen or just don't want to see bad user reviews?
Probably not. There are still not enough safeguards in place to stop people from, like, coordinating these just online attacks after the movie's release. But Rotten Tomatoes plans to roll out more changes apparently over the next few months for the audience rating system, including enhanced security, whatever that means. So hopefully it means I'll be implementing more safeguards and trying to stop these coordinated attacks, which are they're just terrible. Yeah. They're not fun.
And some of them are Russian bots and like.
Yeah, I think there's a whole article about how, like, Russian bots are kind of being like an add thing to this, and so that I wonder if Rotten Tomatoes is going to be doing more, but it's already taken them, I think, like almost about a year, because Black Panther was one of the first films to see this kind of coordinated attack before the movie's release, and now that Captain Marvel is undergoing that now, and at this point. Episode 9 of Star Wars is too. Rotten Tomatoes is finally just kind of kicking into action.
Yeah, I feel like what they need to do is they need to put a system in place that will give more weight to people that actually have reviewed many movies on Rotten Tomatoes, rather than people that are new users, or that this is the only film, or only a couple films they've rated on the service, because I feel like that's a way to get around the bot issue until the bots figure that out, and then they just rate every movie on the service. I don't know. Maybe there isn't a way around this, but I guess the way around this is to make it a little bit more difficult. Ben, is there an answer for this?
Man, I don't know. That's above my pay grade. I think we've all seen like the horrible effects of this stuff and just how eye-rolling it is every single time. And I'm sure there are people inside Rotten Tomatoes who are just as annoyed with it as we are. So I would like to think that they're doing everything they can to try to come up with a way. But I mean, it's going to be tough to figure out a way to stop this entirely. So yeah, I think you're right, Peter. At this point, it's just a matter of like putting a Band-Aid on the Hoover Dam kind of thing.
Yeah, and I don't think Rotten Tomatoes wants to get rid of the user ratings. They obviously love that community. And I've even seen films recently, instead of using the Rotten Tomato score, like actually advertising with the Rotten Tomato user rating score. I believe it was The Upside that used it. I don't know. I would have to look that up. But anyways, let's move on to a story that hit on Friday while we were away, and that is that A Quiet Place 2 is actually happening, which is something we did know, but we didn't know who was going to direct it, and we didn't know who was going to star in it. And now we know that, and I'm even way more confused. Ben, tell us about it.
Yeah, so John Krasinski, who co-wrote and directed A Quiet Place last year, is coming back to direct the sequel. So we've known for months that he was going to be on board as a writer, but this is the first official confirmation that he's actually going to be directing this sequel as well. Not only that, but Emily Blunt is coming back, and Millicent Simmonds and Noah Jupe, the actors who played the kids in the first movie, are coming back. So
wait a second. I thought Krasinski said that the sequel was not going to be a sequel, but it was going to take place in the same world with a different family.
He definitely did say that, and we've spent the last several months under the assumption that that's the approach that he had to this sequel, but it seems like things have changed. According to The Hollywood Reporter, the team considered two options for the follow-up. One would have focused on a brand new aspect of the post-apocalyptic world featuring the creatures, and the second involved the continuing saga of the protective mother and her children. So that's the quote from THR, and it sounds like they ended up going with that second option. I wasn't even aware that there was a second option on the table, because Krasinski has spent the past few months, even during award season for A Quiet Place, fielding questions about the sequel and talking about how excited he was to approach a different, the same world in a different way, like talking up how the world was the most important thing, not necessarily these particular characters within it. But now it seems like they're just going back to those characters, which, I mean, it's hard to get upset about Emily Blunt starring in a new movie because she's so great, and Krasinski being behind the camera again because he did such a good job crafting the visual language of this movie and the overseeing the really like the unique theatrical experience that everybody had about it. We talked about how that was like one of our probably collective like favorite theatrical experiences as a site last year, like watching that movie and having that be such a special thing. So the idea that they're all coming back for more is interesting and potentially exciting, but it certainly goes against everything that we've heard over the past several months, from like directly from the horse's mouth. So it's a sort of a fascinating development here.
Another reason this confuses me is because, spoilers for A Quiet Place, but for the next minute. But at the end of the movie, they kind of figure out the monster's weakness, right? So now that they have this knowledge going forward, it feels like it's a lot less thrilling, right?
Yeah, unless they become, sort of revolutionaries who like travel the country or maybe the world, like spreading this knowledge to everybody and like, freeing people from the scourge of these aliens. I'm not really sure the scope of what this thing is going to be. I'm really just sort of stunned at the complete 180 in direction on this. HT, what do you think about this news?
I think it's interesting that he did the 180. I'm not angry about going back to these characters because I did like them, but I'm not sure where they can go from here except to just completely change the story structure completely. And Yeah, I don't really know. I was interested to see like where they would go with a new family, but I can kind of see them pulling sort of like a Stranger Things, and that Stranger Things was meant to be an anthology series, but they got so attached to the characters that they couldn't, they had to go back to them. So, yeah, I mean, I'm still interested because Christensen did such a great job with the first film, and Emily Blunt. It would be really cool to see her do some sort of like Terminator 2 turnaround with this film.
Oh yeah,
maybe.
that's interesting.
It's set a few years in the future where she's like now like a total badass.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm also wondering, like, do you think there's at all the possibility of like them doing kind of like a Scream swerve where like the movie starts off with them and then becomes not about them?
I would be kind of mad because then if they kill off Emily Blunt in the first 5 minutes,
Yeah,
I just want to know she's alive in the world somewhere.
I can't believe I didn't think about that sooner, Peter, because that strikes me as actually the most plausible thing because of how much Krasinski has been talking about that other approach for so long. It seems like by bringing them on, this is the perfect opportunity to set up a swerve like that. And yeah, just kill everybody, make a big deal about how they're all coming back. All the actors are coming back, kill them off in the first 5 minutes. And then you're able to focus on the story that he's been talking about telling for the past few months. So, man, if I was a betting man, I might put some money on that.
Yeah. Let's move on to Marvel. Kevin Feige has been doing some interviews to promote Captain Marvel, which comes out soon. And people have been asking him questions about the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And we don't really know much concrete about the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We know that Endgame's coming out and then followed by Spider-Man Far From Home. And in the future, we know some stuff is development, but they have not announced anything quite yet in terms of like what's going to be on different release dates and what their plans are. And someone asked him, I guess, apparently, when are we going to find out the future slate of the MCU? HT, what do we know?
So Feige confirmed that the future slate of the MCU won't be revealed until after both Avengers Endgame and Spider-Man Far From Home hit theaters. So that means we won't get any news about the planned Marvel movies until after July 5th, which can kind of put the timeline around this year's San Diego Comic-Con or D23, either or maybe both. We can expect big news from probably either of those conventions.
Yeah, Comic-Con's in like mid-July and D23 is in August sometime, I think.
Yes, yeah. So, that'll be perhaps, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what's going to happen. I don't think we're going to get this massive event like we did at the El Capitan to announce the last phase leading up to Infinity War. I think we're going to probably get it split between Comic-Con and D23. Maybe the more like sequel and family-friendly stuff at D23 and the more nerdy comic book stuff like, the Eternals probably at Comic-Con. Speaking of the Eternals, Kevin Feige has been talking about the Eternals and telling us what we can expect.
Yeah, so The Eternals, it's a movie coming up. It's directed by Chloe Zhao, who made a film called The Rider. And we know that Feige in an interview just was talking about Phase 4 and talking about how everything after Far From Home is going to be, quote, different and, quote, unique. But in terms of The Eternals, which is a movie that's based on these sort of spacefaring comics about an advanced alien race and the Eternals and the Deviants, who are these bitter enemy races. It's all very Jack Kirby and very sort of trippy and out there in the comics. But in terms of the movie, Kevin Feige said, seeing returning characters is certainly something we're going to do and want to do, but also introducing characters that the majority of the world has never heard of, and there are lots of them. Eternals are one group, but we like the idea of introducing an ensemble, doing an ensemble movie from the start as opposed to building up as we did with the first Avengers. More like Guardians, not tonally, but in terms of introducing a new group of people. You were asking about the 60s and 70s before. Jack Kirby did an immense, amazing epic with Eternals that spans tens of thousands of years, and that's also something we haven't really done, which is why that, among many other things, post-Endgame, we find appealing. So he sort of implies there that the Eternals movie could span tens of thousands of years, which would certainly be different and unique for the MCU. We've not seen anything on that scale in terms of setting and timeline in one movie yet. So And the characters in the Eternals are basically immortal, so it makes sense for those particular characters. And maybe you can read more about that in the article if you're interested in sort of getting into more of the nitty gritty of who these characters are and what they're up to. But Peter, what do you think about this?
I don't know much about the Eternals, but the concept of a movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that spans tens of thousands of years, to me, kind of breaks the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because it doesn't seem like we'd get much of a crossover there, because, what happens in the last 10 years of the MCU would be over in a blink in this movie, and we're not going to see our heroes cross over with their heroes. So I'm guessing my question is Marvel trying to create other universes inside the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Like, is this the first of this happening? Could we see, could the X-Men... I mean, I guess that would defeat the purpose of what everybody wanted, was they wanted a crossover between the X-Men and the Avengers when, if Disney bought Fox, or is about to purchase Fox. What do you think, Ben?
I don't know. My first thought was like, maybe they could, because this thing would span so much time, they could theoretically go back in and sort of retroactively reveal that some of the events that we've seen thus far in the MCU may have been put in motion by some of these immortal characters, which, like you said, would sort of break the universe. So I'm not really sure what the approach is there. And I would like to think that they're not going to introduce the X-Men as, taking place or I guess operating in the MCU hundreds of years after the events of the MCU as we know it so far. I really don't know.
HT, do you have any thoughts on the Eternals?
I don't know much about them like you, Peter, but I am intrigued by the prospect of an epic sort of fantasy of this scale. I don't think that Marvel has done anything like that before, and I want to see if they can pull it off. If so, it would be extremely my shit. So I would like to see this. It doesn't make sense in terms of the MCU and everything, but I like to think that maybe if they're doing the Eternals, they're trying to do something like maybe a set apart from the rest of the MCU.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, that is all the news. Let's go into our feature presentation. A couple weeks ago, I got to sit down with the filmmakers behind Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I'm talking about directors Peter Ramsey, Bob Persichetti, and Rodney Rothman, who, and it was in anticipation of the home video release, which is now on home video on digital and will be on physical media in a few weeks. So in this conversation, I talked to the filmmakers about what did not make the final cut of the film. This includes alternate scenes, deleted scenes. Notoriously, there was a 3-hour cut of this film at one point, and that 3-hour cut included Tom Cruise and James Cameron as characters in this film. It also included Miles Morales' best friend Genki, who was voiced by Pixar director Pete Sohn, who did The Good Doctor, Good Dinosaur, and he provides some fan favorite characters like Squishy in Monsters University and Emile in Ratatouille, and was the inspiration of Russell from Up. He's a long-time Pixar animator. So learn about all that and more in our full conversation with the filmmakers. Here it is.
Recording, okay.
You work for Slash Film, right?
Yes.
Yeah, big fan of you guys.
Says all kinds of nice things. Was cool at the LA Online Film Critics. With
I recall.
Yeah.
Yes. I recall.
First of all, can I get you guys to sign?
Yes, and while we're doing that, can I ask you about your shirt? Where did you get that shirt? Was that a gift today, or
somewhere.
did you?
No, it was.
You found it online. That's
it was a
really rad.
bootleg.
That's rad.
Something. Yeah,
it's a good bootleg.
Because they don't make a lot of cool.
Well, because
merch.
Sony doesn't.
Yeah, there's a deal involved that doesn't involve Sony.
Yeah,
when it comes to that stuff.
We're here talking about Blu-ray. I'm wondering what kind of deleted and alternate scenes can we find on this thing? Which is some of the favorites that didn't quite make it. And actually, could you guys say your names for the audio?
This is Rodney Rothman.
Peter Ramsey. Bob Persichetti.
I'm getting pretty used to my quotes and Bob's quotes getting interchanged. I'll be like, I sound really smart about technical animation.
It's funny because I was thinking the same thing.
But
That you sounded really smart about technical.
No,
I'm kidding.
no, I don't know.
That's funny. But now you totally derailed the question. What was the question?
What are some of your favorite deleted scenes?
I apologize.
Favorite deleted scenes. Why don't we go down the line?
Feel free to say the billboard if you want.
Yeah,
I have a different one.
I'm not sure that it
is.
It's going to be really nice for people to see the Ganke and Miles stuff.
Right.
That's
What is that?
Ganke was Miles' roommate in the comics. I mean, we were being very faithful to the comics in that relationship was almost.
It was there before school.
Yeah, it was close to being the emotional backbone of the movie. Those two guys' relationship in a way, and which is probably one reason it's not there anymore.
Yes.
But it was so charming, and we had so much fun with it, and it took up so much of the movie for so long that when we had to finally shift gears and cut that way back, it was a huge. It was kind of traumatic. So it's nice that people get to see a literal alternate universe version of the movie.
Yeah, we also had some great. One of my college friends did the voice for Ganke.
Also a wildly famous animation
this
director.
Yeah. He won't get in trouble anymore because we talked to the people at Pixar, right?
Yeah.
It's Pete Sohn, who directed
I love Pete Sohn.
Yeah, so Pete's a magic man, right?
Yeah.
He went to Cal Arts when I went to Cal Arts. So he came down, and he's Korean American from the Bronx and is a giant lover of comic books, and that's that character.
Yeah.
And it was just there's nobody else but Pete who should do this character. And he came down, recorded the whole movie. And it's really good. It's really good. But the movie was 3 hours long.
Yeah.
And there was no room for Peter to come into the movie. So,
And it wasn't because of Spider-Man: Homecoming.
well, you can read into it what you want.
Okay.
But I'm
Off the record, man.
I'm just saying that there were some Ned similarities.
That was off the record.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was off the dang record. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in that version, stuff that we took out of the movie for good reasons, but that give you a window into the creative process behind the years that were spent on the movie. So, just like an example of stuff, or the stuff they're talking about. There's a line from Doc Ock that's a very direct reference to probably Doc Ock's most famous line in Spider-Man 2. There's is the Tom Cruise stuff in the alternate universe version? So there's there was a whole period of time where Miles, rather than learning about being Spider-Man from a comic book, learned it from watching the film. Yeah, there was a movie version, a movie about Spider-Man in Miles' universe, about the real person Spider-Man, but it was a James Cameron directed movie
With Tom Cruise as Spidey.
Yes.
And it was James Cameron and Tom Cruise on the audio.
Yeah, but it was literally the director's commentary with guest star Tom Cruise
And guest star real Spider-Man.
and guest star real Spider-Man
with his voice.
He was a technical advisor on the
Yes, and the fact that it's taken us almost 3 minutes to explain this idea to you, it gives you an idea of why it didn't make the movie.
Didn't make the cut.
But oh my God, it was fun to do.
Yeah.
It was so fun.
Damn. No.
Rodney said on Twitter
Oh boy.
that the third act of this film was basically improvised. I'm wondering what that means.
That's why I don't go on Twitter.
I kind of walked it back a little later.
Did you?
Like I walked back most things. I'll tell you.
Well,
I didn't see that walk back.
No, I mean I made some kind of offhand comment.
He walked it back with his kid at home.
Yeah. What I meant by that, you can't improvise a massive animated movie. But what I meant by that was that we built the third act of the movie in the last 4 months of production.
Basically from kind of bullet points and index cards.
The bit that was here's the bit that was always an anchor. Once we had that anchor in, we were like, that's the target, and everything's just leading to the moment when Miles and Jefferson talk. And Miles leaves on his mask and he hugs him and he says, "All right, I look forward to working with you." That moment when we storyboarded that moment and we cut it into the film, it was like, oh, yes. Like, there's the target. No matter what, that's where we're going to end. But all the junk that came between, the collider firing, like from Ock and Kingpin and the ballroom and the bread moment.
Yeah.
So from there, all the way to that moment when the collider sort of implodes.
Yeah.
Essentially was like a deck of cards or 3 decks of cards,
Yes.
and we were going all the way, like even in production.
Like throwing down the
And
railroad
like-
tracks
and
while
like-
the train was going.
And we would
Yeah,
we
we
would
do.
do edit. We like even in animation, you know, ImageWorks in sort of like a real rudimentary way. We'd like open up shots. We would shrink shots. We would go, oh, we need another shot here because we were so behind.
Yeah.
And we were literally like my favorite line that Rodney ever said was like, "Man, how does it feel to be Jackson Pollocking like a underscore budget $1 million movie?" And that because that's kind of what we were doing
I think
at
it
the
felt
very
like.
end.
But I think what I meant by that.
With direction, though. Like we had a point.
But I think that's what I meant by by that or by the improvisation comment. And I'll speak about other people, not myself. Like we were working.
I wasn't saying that as a negative
No,
thing.
no,
I was
no,
just
no,
curious.
I was working
on
with
the level,
amazing people.
everybody was improvising.
I was working with amazing people. We were working with amazing technicians and filmmakers, in every department. We really were. And, great improvisation is performed by people that know what they're doing.
And they're all up here.
Yeah,
Like,
I know.
and at that moment, every single shot was building off of shots we had done earlier in the movie. And so every single shot was like a new discovery. The visuals of the entire climax of the fight, we saw the week they were done. That was when we went like, that's it. And I mean, we had obviously a plan in place and an aspiration. That was the idea that this space becomes abstract and is being inundated by black Kirby dots, which are helping us represent sort of Kingpin, and Miles is being swallowed up by all of that, and we're going to get him to be super tiny on that screen. But that was it, and then it was like, here we go, and now we're starting to see things in dailies, and we're like, oh yes, and so it was in that sense, it did feel like we were looking around the room, going like, oh yeah, amazing,
Right. But by the way, I think the reason why it worked for us, and and why we all felt, although we'd love to have another month or two to work on it, why we all felt happy with how it turned out is because it expressed Miles, and it expressed where Miles was, like visually, and artistically, it was just a kid that had just come into a power and was just figuring out how to use it on the fly, and that's kind of how we made the last 20 minutes of the movie.
Very true.
Totally.
Very cool. Thank you guys.
Oh, man.
Hey, pleasure,
It was
man.
again my
Pleasure.
favorite movie of last year. so.
Thanks,
so much.
man.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And there you have it. You can find more of all the stories we mentioned on today's podcast on slashfilm.com and linked in the show notes. This podcast, Slash Film Daily, is published every weekday on iTunes, Google, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please feel free to send your feedback, questions, comments, concerns to us at peter@slashfilm.com. And please head on over to our iTunes page, give us a 5-star review, write a couple words, tell your friends, spread the word. See you tomorrow.